So, in addition to impacting the Protestant Reformation, print also has been said to play a role in the development of nationalism and capitalism. So, with the advent of print, books could be printed and Bibles, moreover, could be printed in the local languages that were being spoken throughout Europe, what's typically called vernacular languages, as opposed to in Latin, as the Catholic Church had all of their Bibles written in. So there were now, the development of individual national identities around languages that became more widespread because of the printing press. And so, what one scholar, Benedict Anderson, has argued is that the printing press then played a role in the development of the nation state and a larger system of modern capitalism that accompanied it in the from the time of the printing press in 1450 up through the 1700s. Now, what Neil Postman does is he picks up with those ideas about print and its role in creating the modern world, and moves to discussing it within the context of 19th century America. And in this chapter, he focuses on the Lincoln Douglas debates. And he doesn't really explain what the Lincoln Douglas debates were, but if this is something that you aren't familiar with, these were a series of public debates in 1850 between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas about the expansion of slavery in the new territories and states, whether or not they should be slaveholding or if they should be free. And these are really held as an example of kind of the height of uh, sort of engaged, literate U.S. democracy. Because Lincoln and Douglas spoke for hours and hours on end. But these were not sort of cut off from the masses. These were not sort of elite conversations. These weren't considered particularly boring either. Rather, these were major public events that people traveled from miles and miles around to go attend and listen to these conversations. What Neil Postman argues is that while these were oral arguments, this was a form of oratory. He says that a society that was steeped in print culture, right? Only a society steeped in print culture could actually produce these kinds of events. And so, even though people were listening, right, to the spoken word, their ability to listen to the spoken word was predicated on their familiarity with print. And so Postman points towards a couple of things. He says that print produced a literate population, right? That because reading material in print was widespread throughout the United States, that people, regardless of their class status, were able to read. One thing to note that Postman overlooks here is, of course, that slaves themselves were forbidden from reading. But I think in that fact, you actually really see the kind of acknowledged power of print, right? That if you want to keep a population enslaved, then it's going to be really important to prevent them from reading, right, and keeping them ignorant and keeping them from developing their own ideas and communicating their own ideas. That print had produced a literate population that was able to actually think and reason and engage in these kinds of complex ideas. That is evident, right, by an event like the Lincoln-Douglas debates. The second thing that he points to is that print requires concentration. And he says that in order to listen to these long, hours-long arguments, people needed a very high level of concentration and the ability to be attentive. Um, this is something that we would probably have a very difficult time with today. And Postman was writing in the television era. Um, this might even be, much more so today in the digital era, right, where our attention is being grabbed at by a million different forces. It's hard for many of us to just get through a pretty short reading, right? Um, no fault of you guys if that's the case. What Postman would say is that this is part of the larger culture that we live in. And the third aspect is that print encouraged rational argument. Um, and this is part of that larger Enlightenment tradition that Slack and Wise point to, right? The ability to think, the ability to read, the ability to concentrate, the ability to argue is all wrapped up, according to Postman, in the role that print as a technology played.